Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another review, and it's another episode of First Impressions, the video series where I discuss films. Either ones that I have been meaning to see for a while, or ones that are going through their theatrical run. Today is one of the latter. It is Family Plot, the last film directed by Alfred Hitchcock before he passed away. Now, it's a film I've known about for years, like a lot of other Hitchcock films, just been on the to-watch list. It's one that, while I never watched it in cinema as literature, either year I took it in high school, although the year I TA'd for the teacher that taught it, she showed it. So I actually had to grade a bunch of critiques on it, so I got a vague idea of what it was about. And it's a part of the box set that I have on the shelf over there. It's just, I only got around to start watching it when I did the Mar Talks on Rear Window. You know, time and all that. Procrastination. Anyway, it's part of my class I'm taking, the film class. It was the last film that we watched from Hitchcock this year. He was going to show another one, but then, as he said, I just can't this year. So he just showed Family Plot. So, win-win for me. Could see another Hitchcock film I haven't seen. It's one I've been meaning to watch. Now, I can say I definitely enjoy this film. Out of the Hitchcock films I've seen that I remember, it's definitely his weakest film. But that's not to say it's a bad film. It's just, when you compare it to Psycho, Rear Window, Vertigo, even, I'd say I probably like it a little bit more than Notorious, but it's around that same level. It's just not as good. It shows that he still is a master of everything technical. It just compared to his masterpieces, it's steps down. And I could say it does prove, at least for me, part of auteur theory is correct. And if you're wondering what that part is, the part of auteur theory that I think it proves right is that a genius's worst film will still be better than a mediocre director's best film. And I say I enjoy this movie better than probably the best films by people such as Mr. Michael Bay. But then again, I haven't seen all his films, but I can definitely say I enjoy this probably enjoy it more than Pain and Gain, but I haven't rewatched that film since, so kind of a bold statement to make, but it definitely was crafted technically better than Pain and Gain. It is based off a novel by Victor Canning, which, from what I managed to gather, it is actually very faithful to the original story. There's only a couple differences, or at least major ones, and one of them being that the main character, Blanche, actually is a psychic in the book, which, given Hitchcock's sense of humor, I can see why they changed that. It makes the film a little funnier if she's a fraud. That leads into the second one, and that is the novel seems to be played more straight. Stories full straight, whereas the movie is a dark comedy thriller. And if you know Hitchcock's dark sense of humor, you can imagine where this goes. Since it's the mid-late 70s, there is a little bit more innuendo humor than he could get away with early on. I mean, early on he did have, like some quick witty dialogue, but here he can be a little bit more explicit, but not as explicit as later films could get, or as explicit as Hitchcock would want to go, but it's witty and you're like, oh, that's funny. Of course, he takes some of the physical comedy a little bit further than he could have in the past, but nothing too... obscene is probably the first word that came to mind, but that's not probably the right word. Raunchy would probably be the better word to describe it. Ernest Lehman wrote the screenplay for Hitchcock, and from what I've been able to gather, Hitch actually was giving him notes, lighten up a screenplay. Because apparently the original draft he wrote seems to be a little bit closer to the novel in tone. And Hitch was like, lighten it up. We gotta have fun with this. It's only a movie. Probably didn't say it like that, but that's more or less probably what he told the guy. One interesting little bit of trivia about this film is that the score was composed by John Williams. That's right, John Williams of Star Wars and Jaws composed it. And this is right after he did Jaws, so he was on retainer for Universal. And one thing I noticed, you can actually notice this if you listen closely to the music, because it has the best of both worlds. It is scored how Hitchcock typically has his composers score his films, but you can definitely tell by listening to it that Williams had his hand in here because of how he has his musical arrangements arranged, the instruments he uses, especially if you know his 70s compositions, you can tell it's him before you even read it. Or you might be going, why does this guy sound familiar? Then you read it like, oh, it's John Williams, that makes sense. And apparently, when he was making the music, Hitchcock actually gave Williams some notes about what he wanted. And you kind of tell that in the final score, because it does have the best of both worlds. and it comes out as a great score. From what I managed to gather about it, it wasn't released on a CD until 2010. It's a long time if you think about it. The movie was released in '76, so what is that? That's 34 years if I'm counting right. Now, the plot of the film is that Madame Blanche is a psychic, and I'm using that in parentheses. And I'm using that in quotation marks because she's a fake. But she's approached by this rich society lady who's elderly, I'm guessing 70s, maybe 80s, who wants to use her abilities to find her illegitimate nephew, born to her sister, I believe younger sister probably, years ago, when he was born at a time where single mothers were unheard of, and in the rich society it would have been like, scandalous, ooh. So they basically got rid of him, put him up for adoption, and she's feeling haunted in her dreams, and she has no children, no other family, so she wants to find her nephew and make him the heir to her estate. And if Madame Blanche manages to find him, it's going to get 10,000 smackaroos, 10,000 big ones, 10 grand. And this is 10 grand in 1976 money, so you can imagine that'd probably be maybe about 100,000 nowadays. I'll probably look it up on the inflation calculator and then put it up right here, but I can imagine it'd be around there. Maybe not exact, but in the ballpark. Now, Blanche and her boyfriend George, who is a cab driver, they look into it and they think they figure out who it is. It has to do with this gentleman by the name of Ed Shoebridge. And it turns out he's possibly dead, because his parents died in a fire, his body was never found, so most people think he's dead too. It just keeps going on in there, and it ends up being tied in with this kidnapping that happened. Two kidnappings actually that happened. One before the film, that we actually see the exchange of the person who was kidnapped for the ransom, and then another one that happens in the course of the film, which is tied up again with the whole Shoebridge thing, because the person who's kidnapped is one of the few people who might know the identity of the baby, and if it actually is Shoebridge or not. So, little coincidence thing. And Shoebridge actually is alive and is the male of the two people who are doing the kidnappings. So it's a little bit of a tie-in thing, coincidence there. And of course, later on when Blanche and George think they are about to get to talk to Ed or get a good lead on him, Ed, who is going under the name Arthur Adams, thinks that they are onto their plot and wants to kill them, so it goes from there. And that whole thinking that they are onto him and wanting them dead route actually leads into one of the funniest little scenes in the movie, where he gets one of his old buddies who actually helped with the death of his parents to cut George's brakes when they're going downhill through the mountains. But this is funny because it cuts from point of view shots, which are shot in a way that's like, ooh, I wonder how they managed to get that. And then when they cut back, George trying to get control of the car, Blanche all freaking out, don't grab my tie. It's just, I can't, without showing the actual scene, I can't do the film justice by describing it, but trust me, it is very funny. And from what I've managed to gather, it actually was Hitch's little spoof on car chase scenes of the time, and looking at it, I can believe it. This is one of the many bits of humor throughout the film, obviously. Barbara Harris plays Blanche, who is our female lead, and she does a pretty good job acting-wise, especially when she has to do the scenes where she's doing the fake psychic powers and is kind of distracted. She has to play all into it. She gets all into it. And then the slightly raspy, deep voice she puts on when it's supposed to be the spirit talking through her, it really is good. I mean, we the audience know it's all a sham, but within the world of the film, the character she's talking to buy it, especially the lady that starts the plot up, which she is a very interesting character too, but not really much else to talk about with her. Only other things of interest that Barbara has done, at least that I read through, were the original Freaky Friday and Peggy Sue Got Married. And of course, given that it's a Hitchcock film and the bad guys are going to get caught, and I'm not going to spoil all about it, but it does end with a little bit of a literal link. It does end with a literal wink at the audience, which apparently was unintentional, but Hitch liked it so much he left it in, and considering this was the last film he managed to make before his health failed and he ultimately passed away, it is a fitting codex for the legendary auteur filmmaker's career. Bruce Dern played George. This isn't the first time he worked with Hitchcock. He worked on, I think, an episode or two of Alfred Hitchcock's Presents, and he was also in Marnie in a small role as a sailor. Now, apparently, the main reason he was cast in this film, from what I managed to gather, or at least what Hitch told Dern when he asked him on the set, was that one of his original choices, Al Pacino, wanted $1 million for the role, and as you all know, Hitch ain't paying no $1 million, especially at this time. So, he said no. Now, the way he told Dern the name, I don't know if this is Hitch intentionally mispronouncing it, or mispronouncing it because of his accent, or Dern just hearing the name wrong, but it came out as Mr. Pacino. Either way, I could see going, or maybe a little of both. Hitch slightly alters the pronunciation, and Dern thinks he said Pacino. He's like, Mr. Pacino, who is that? Oh, Pacino. Whoa, I replaced Al Pacino? Huh. I know that'd probably be a little bit of an ego burst, but then you're like, I'm cheaper than Al Pacino. He does a decent job for what he has to do. I mean, the role isn't that deep, but it's fitting for what he has to do. He's Blanche's boyfriend. He has some funny moments to do, and he's the guy who basically saves the day in the end. It would have been interesting to see Al Pacino do this, but it would have been one of those roles where it's like, yeah, he's kind of wasted in here, but he gets to work with Hitch. Outside of these films, the only ones I know him from are his recent collaborations with Quentin Tarantino, the small role in Django Unchained, and of course, his bigger role in The Hateful Eight, where he gets shot by Samuel L. Jackson. You gotta love that. William Devane played Adamson/Stonebridge, and he does a very good job for his role. From the moment you first see the man, you hate him. You know that by the end of the film, you're going to want to punch his character in the face. And every time he's on scene, he does not waste any screen time, and he just makes you hate him even more. Now, we don't actually see him get his ultimate comeuppance, but we know well enough he's going to get it. And based on what he's done, it's like, yep, you're going to do a lot of time. He's probably never going to come out of that cell. Other than this, the only other films that I recognize that William did are Interstellar and The Dark Knight Rises, which I haven't seen Interstellar, so I don't know what he plays in that. Dark Knight Rises, I haven't seen in a while, so I don't recognize who he did, but I think he might be the banker guy, if I read the screen credit right. Karen Black played Fran, who is Shoebridge's partner in crime, and the blonde woman that you see on the posters for it. By the way, that's a wig. But it ties into one of Hitchcock's things, you know, blondes. She does a good job for what she has to do. She's not as despicable as Adamson is, but you still, you know that she's not doing things, she's not doing nice things, but you can tell she's a nicer person than he is, and that if she had the chance, she would not do some of the stuff he's suggesting. Like, when he suggests killing Madame Blanche, you could tell she does not want to do it at all, but she's going along with it, mainly because she knows if she crosses Eddie the wrong way, she'll end up in the river too. I recognize more films she's been in than him, unfortunately. Easy Rider, the original trilogy of Terror, Capricorn 1, a film that's on the to-watch list. It's a film about what would happen if the government faked a Mars landing, and it has O.J. Simpson in it. Winning. And more recently, House of a Thousand Corpses, where she was one of the family members. And out of these main ones, she passed away a couple years ago, so R.I.P. There's more actors and stuff, but I just decided I'll just talk about the main four. They all, like I said, they all do good jobs. All the supporting cast do good for what they have to do. Hitch's cinematography, excellent. If you've seen a Hitchcock film, you know how he is behind the camera and how his cinematography is going to be. For the scenes where he's really playing up the comedy, like the point of view shots in the car chase scene, really works. And like all of his other films, when his camera moves, you know it's for something important, and when it lingers on something, it's really important. It shows how you should do cinematography, especially in a thriller or a suspense film. Now, like I said at the beginning, not his best film, but still a very entertaining and fun film. And I will have to agree, in moments it does fall under this category of what my professor described it as, and that's a little hokey, especially when you compare it to other Hitchcock films, but hokey in the good way. It's in the fun way. I'd say it's kind of hokey in the same way that the latter half of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is that it goes a little bit into the territory of being outrageous, especially when compared to the first half in the author's other works. But that doesn't mean it's not entertaining, it's just you're like, really? But you just go along with it for the ride and you enjoy it. And in that manner, this is probably not the best film for Hitch to go out on as a whole, But it's still a fun film, and like I said at the beginning, still a lot more entertaining than the worst director's best films, at least in my opinion. If I were to give it a rating after one view, probably 3.5 out of 5. I'm gonna take a couple more viewings to see if I like it, but I've definitely put myself in the category of people who enjoy the film. I don't love the film, but I like the film.